Hello, I am Moodida, and welcome back to Satisfactory. I have recently discovered a terrific way to generate an extreme amount of power using very little crude oil. The other huge advantage to this is how simple this factory is. Yes, this will use a decent amount of sulfur, but are you really planning on using all of it? If you are, then this may not be for you. But for many pioneers, this could be the last power plant setup you need to finish the game. I'll be going through the recipes and blueprints I'm going to be using in my next 1.0 playthrough video. First off, this is definitely a late game power plant. I'm currently in phase 4, and this requires you to have blenders unlocked. Once you unlock rocket fuel in the MAM, the alternate will become available once you scan or rescan another hard drive. Let's compare the two recipes on a small scale. These examples will be to create 150 rocket fuel, which is what one blender will produce at 100%. Before we get to the flowcharts, let's take a look at the raw numbers. So to make 150 rocket fuel using the default recipe, these would be the inputs. I left the iron plates as its own input. I figured at this stage of the game, you can figure out how to make it however you like. And these are the numbers for the alternate recipe. When comparing the required resources, it's pretty clear the default is more efficient on everything except for crude oil. Part of the reason being, with the default recipe you need to create turbo fuel, and the most efficient way to do that is with petroleum coke instead of coal, and does add to the complexity. Now let's look at the flowcharts. And this right here is the flowchart for the default recipe. It is overly complicated because you're making turbo fuel in two different ways, one using petroleum coke and then one using the recycled compacted coal that you're getting back from the very last step. And here we have the beautifully simple flowchart of the alternate recipe. So even though at first glance you would think that this one would be the more complicated one because it has twice the inputs, it's really simple. And this setup right here is all you need. Do everything in that flowchart. I love it. So let me show you. So this right here is where I was first kind of playing around with how exactly I wanted to try to get things to fit in a small area. What I went with is working my way backwards. I figured the biggest part of all of this was going to be the fuel generators, and I was right. This by far takes up the most amount of space. This is all sitting on a 5x5 blueprint. And you can actually fit 4 fuel generators in a 5x5, and I'll show you how to do it. And that right there is what you can run off of one blender, making 150 rocket fuel. So this is making 150, and to use that, each fuel generator, as we can see right here, rocket fuel burns at 4.167 meters cubed per minute. So if we have 150, 4.1, I'm pretty sure it's actually, 1.66 repeating. So that means I could run 36 fuel generators at 100%. As you can see, I don't have that many. In fact, there's only 4 in each of those 5x5 grids. So I have 16 here in total. So to make that work, each one of these is going to be clocked to 225%. So if we take 150, divide by 16, that's 9.375. And if we divide that by 2.25, hey look, there's our 4.16667. Each one of these machines is going to generate 562.5 power. So this right here, this one blender will create 9,000 megawatts of power. And you need 100 fuel, 75 nitrogen, 100 sulfur, and 50 coal. I'll be using the diluted fuel recipe to make that fuel, so I need 50 heavy oil residue, 100 water. That's easy. For the heavy oil residue, I just need 37.5 crude oil. So I can turn 37.5 crude oil, along with the sulfur and the coal and the nitrogen, into 9,000 megawatts. That is huge. So now that you kind of see the layout, let me go through the blueprints real quickly. For this, we are going to need the Mark II blueprinter, but at this stage of the game, you have it unlocked. First step is to make fuel. So we've got one refinery making heavy oil residue, and then the blender making the diluted fuel. Now this one is clocked to 100%, nothing special here. This one, however, I am going to use a power shard so that I can make things simple and only have to use one machine, which means there's only one pipe to deal with. So this will output the 50 heavy oil residue that I need for the blender, and then I get some bonus polymer resin that I can use for a future project. Alright, so the idea is that one will go down here. The crude oil will get plugged in here, and then I'll be able to put the next blender just right next to it. Even though it's just a single machine, I do think this is worth blueprinting because I can have all of the colors set, I can have the right height already set for the lifts, and same with the pipe, and same with the output. Even though it's not a lot, this definitely saves a lot of time. This already has the recipe, and this one is also clocked to 100%. And then the idea is this one will just go down right next to it. And now I probably could have included that little bit of the pipe there, but we'll just bring those out to that point. And that right there will connect our fuel into here. And now I just need to plug in coal, sulfur, and nitrogen. And then it will output my rocket fuel and some compacted coal. A big reason why the default recipe is so much more efficient on sulfur than this alternate is because you're able to use that compacted coal and recycle it back into the system, whereas since we're inputting all of those raw resources instead of compacted coal, I can't use it. Well, can't use it for this. So if we take a look in the codex, it'll tell you the recipes, but if you scroll down and you have them unlocked, it also tells you what it's used in. So we can use this compacted coal. I can create some more turbo fuel, maybe run some drones or a secondary power plant, whatever you want. I could make a ton of black powder if I wanted to, but I don't know. If you find a reason to make just a ton of consistent amount of black powder, let me know because that sounds interesting. But even when I create a weapons factory, you can get away with just making just such a little amount. I'm glad that there's alternates to make this sort of stuff, but I just haven't really found a good use for it. This right here though. This, in my playthrough, is what I'm going to be using my compacted coal for. It's actually the most efficient way to make steel ingots while using coal and not using petroleum coke. And I wouldn't go out of my way because then you're sacrificing sulfur just to make steel, and that doesn't seem worth it. But if I already have compacted coal sitting around, I can just combine it with some iron and make a ton of steel. So yes, this is going to be more expensive on sulfur. But in my opinion, I don't think I was going to use all of it in the first place. I love the idea of doing a max nuclear world, but I don't think my PC can take it. And if I'm not going to be using all the sulfur, I think this is just a fantastic way to generate a ton of power. Because as you can see, this is going to scale up really well. The numbers are all super even. 37.5, that's half of 75, which is half of 150. So off of one impure oil node, you could run 4 of these setups and you would be making 36,000 megawatts off of 150 crude oil. That would take care of the fuel. Honestly, 300 nitrogen gas, not a lot. 400 sulfur, I really don't think is that bad for making 36,000 megawatts. And then half of that in coal is a really small amount. And then you could scale this up as big as you want. So if you want to see me scale this up 16 times and use one pure node, that's what I'm going to be doing in my next 1.0 playthrough. But before we can get to that, let me show you how to make the final blueprint. This bad boy right here. So let me go ahead and clear this and I'll show you how to make it. 4 fuel generators fit exactly in the Mark II Blueprint Designer with absolutely no wiggle room. So if we get them all facing each other, it should be nice and easy, right? You just slap down one of these and you're good to go. Except for now, you can't connect it. If I connect it to here, now I can't connect to the pipeline. And if I connect to the pipeline, I can't connect to the machine. So to get around that, what we're going to need to do is connect the 2 machines. And then because I want to make sure that this is exactly in the middle, I don't want to freehand that. I'm going to place a pipeline junction down right in front of here. And when I hold control, now it snaps. And if we go ahead and place it there, This does work. I went ahead and made sure and tested it, and I'll be doing it again in a few minutes just to show you. So we do that on both sides. And then from here, we could connect the two. And same thing, I would really like to make sure that's in the middle, just to make sure things are nice and even. But if I'm going to be connecting multiples of these, I want to give myself options, and so I want to rotate this up. And now, for whatever reason, it snaps 1 meter off from where I want it to. It just does this when I have it straight. It's exactly where you think. Vertical, it's 1 meter off. I don't really know why, but I do know that I can just place another 1 meter offset, and we can just work with it. So now it's exactly where I want. Go ahead and place it. And then from here, I can connect it to the next one really easily, because my plan is to have it set up like this, where I've got a nice little gravity feed. I'll have to pump up the crude oil and the water, but all the rocket fuel gets to just be gravity fed into the fuel generators. As you can see, we're out here in the Spire Coast, so I have easy access to the crude oil. However, since this is a creative world, I am just going to throw together a real temporary setup instead of creating a huge bus. If you want to see me do this for real, tune back in a few days. And voila, we've got a test. Like I mentioned, this is a creative world, so I just spawned in a whole bunch of coal, sulfur. For nitrogen, the only way I could think to do it was spawn in a whole bunch of packaged nitrogen, go ahead and unpackage it into a fluid buffer, and yeah, we're just storing the extra ones. This right here, and actually, I've already forgotten to do this part. We need a way to get rid of this. Okay, now we've got a place for the compacted coal to go. So first things first, let's go ahead and plug this up, and that will get our crude oil going. Well, we may need a pump first. Let's go ahead and throw down a pump there. And I bet you I need one for the water as well that I forgot. Yeah, sure do. Thankfully, like I said, this is my creative world, and I don't even need to hook up power. So there goes that. And one of the cool little things, if you didn't know, the arrows on the pump face the direction of the fluid. So since we have it rotated this way, because you can face them in either direction, and that is the indicator of which way it's pumping, is that little arrow next to the Fix-It logo. Okay, so we are making some heavy oil residue. Beautiful. Which means we've already got water. Perfect. And now we're making fuel. Which means we can go ahead and plug up all of this stuff. Forgot that I need to lift it this length. Alright, so there's the coal. Thankfully, the sulfur is nice and easy. That's 100. Yeah, so Mark II is fine. And then we can go ahead and just grab a pipe and connect it to there. And we've got our nitrogen. Ah. Mark II lift would help. Alright, there we go. And as we can see, oh, it's such a cool color. I really like the new fluids that they added. That's really cool. What I like to do with fluids, especially with power plants, I like to let everything just back up. So if I was going to do this for real, I would let all of the pipes back up. So all of these fuel generators would be completely full. The pipe all the way back to the blender would be full until it shuts off, and all the way back until the oil extractor. I realize that that is probably overkill and just doing a whole lot extra that you don't need to, but it really doesn't take long. Like, it's an extra, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes to let everything back up. And then what you do is you come down here, and these have the power connections, but they're not connected. And so that these can keep filling up, they won't turn on until they have a power connection. So once there's a power line, now it'll turn on and start using the fuel. But when I do this, I tend to just have pretty good luck, as long as I didn't screw anything up. And just like that, we've got 9,000 megawatts. It says no power because I have the advanced game setting turned on. That's why there's no cables attached and the pump just works. But I needed to test all of this out, and being in a creative world just makes things a lot easier because I didn't want to slam down 256 of these fuel generators without knowing that this pipework actually works. So it turns out you can make 9,000 megawatts of power in a 10 by 10 area. Not too shabby. And that is going to do it for this one. I hope this helped in some way or inspires some of you to add some rocket fuel to your world. The blueprints I'm using are going to be available on my Google Drive, link down below. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using this setup in my 1.0 playthrough, so if you're interested in seeing this scaled up quite a bit, consider subscribing and checking out the channel in a few days. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.